Luminous Color Stacks. It's a new body of work that I started in January of 2013 and will be hanging at the Carmel Art Association in January of 2014. And they were inspired by Joseph Albers and Heidi Hibble. Inspiration sometimes requires research, and I went and pulled out my Joseph Albers books from college when I took color theory and just revisited works that I really liked of Joseph Albers and made marks and mental notes to myself about where I wanted to go with the work. A lot of the forms, the little cutout shapes that you're going to see, are derivative of shapes that I found in the Albers books. So after determining what kind of shapes I was interested, I cut them out of cardboard and then covered them with resin. And each piece of cardboard got 4 coats of resin on the outside and 2 coats of resin on the inside. And so then after the surface itself was resined, I needed to put them together. So then little strips of fabric were dipped into the resin, and the form itself was then put together. Well, after those pieces were aqua resined, I cut a custom piece of plywood for the ends of each one and left a little window on the top edges as well. So then I needed to cut glass to fit into the window spaces. And I'm using an obscure glass that will obscure the direct light of the neon. It's translucent, not transparent, which is what we're after. And each piece needed to be individually cut, fit, and then glued into the shape. As careful as I am with the aqua resin and trying to get the shapes just right, they always need sanding. So the windows get sanded and the outside of the form gets sanded. I use power tools as well as hand. Sometimes I'm using a rasp or just regular old sandpaper to clean it up. Once the forms are sanded and just exactly how I want them, with the glass glued in, I put tape over the glass so that I'm not going to be dripping wax on it, and then I start painting the surface of the piece with wax. This is encaustics, which is actually a mixture of damar resin and beeswax. Encaustics were used by the ancient Egyptians in their tombs, and they would paint with encaustics. There are encaustic paintings that are thousands of years old. One of the benefits of encaustics is that the damar resin makes the wax so that it melts at a much higher temperature, so it's not ever going to melt in your house, and it also repels dust. So as with most sculptures, a flat surface where dust will fall down will sit on it, but it won't stick to it. You just use a regular dusting, a little dust mop or dusting pad, and it wipes right off. So I first cover the entire surface with wax, and then I take a piece of muslin, which is a fabric, and embed that in wax. Put the muslin over the entire piece and wax it again. This is so that the windows that have been cut through, the glass from the neon tubes, which are eventually going to go into it, will shine through but not be a direct or glaring light. The wax and the fabric act as filters, obscuring the light a little bit. Well, once the entire piece has been covered with wax, then I use an iron to smooth it out. And gravity works both for and against me, so there's a little bit of balancing act to heat the wax and then have it cool down a little bit more before I heat it up again. So I get a nice smooth surface all the way across. eventually some of the iron creates these really interesting textures on the surface of the wax, which when it's not lit you don't see it so much, but that texture comes through with light. So after the whole thing is cooled down, then I'm going to have to add color to the piece. Color is added to the pieces with a little facial sponge, and I'm using pan pastels. I have to rub the entire surface with the pastel, and right at this point the pastel is sitting on top of the wax. So after I've covered the whole surface with a color, I'll take the heat gun to the piece, and what happens here is the wax rises to the surface and just barely covers the wax, so the pastel. So the wax comes up and creates a new surface of wax, and there's no more pastel that can be rubbed off. So for a nice deep rich color, I usually have to do this 3 times. So I apply the color, and then I use the heat gun, heat it up so that the wax rises to the surface and the pastels sink under the wax, and I just repeat that 3 times until it's a really nice solid color that feels rich. There's a little bit of cleanup to do before we bring the pieces into the house, and I didn't show you the whole assembly of how to make a base that has a transformer inside, but that's what I've got right there. I've pulled the lead wires out of my base, and I'm bringing in a plexiglass tube. Inside the tube I've already installed my neon, and I have my electrical leads. So connect up the electrical leads, put an insulating cover over it, and then stick this nice plexiglass tube into the base. And I'm ready to stack up the sculpture. So just one at a time, up they go. They're numbered. They have a sequence and a direction. They have a map, so assembly is pretty easy. You just follow the numbers, plug it in, and there's the finished work. Hope you enjoy.